that Armenians live in the Ottoman Empire. To what extent is the population engaged? That varies. In a place like Diyarbakir or Harput or Sivas, it's a higher percentage of participants. In a place like Adana or Konya, it's less so. I don't know the numbers. It doesn't take a lot of terrorists to cause a problem. It doesn't take thousands of people. It takes a handful of highly motivated people in the right place at the right time, and that's what happens. It's not a generalized condition. Most Armenians are loyal citizens. Most Armenians are not in these committees. This is not a generalized condition, a generalized problem that affects all of the Armenians. The problem in 1914 is, in the 6 provinces, they don't know who's a good guy and who's a bad guy. Why did the British move the entire Boer population in 1901? For the same reason. Why do we move the Nisi Japanese in 1942 to internment camps in Nevada, when most of them, all of them, 100% of them, are loyal citizens? Because we think they're a threat, we don't know who's who, we can't, it's a racist agenda on the part of the Roosevelt administration. If they're Japanese, we can't take a chance. You know, we don't have time to sort them out. We don't have a mechanism to sort them out. We take everybody and send them to the camp. Problem solved. So that's the approach they take. Rightly or, I'm not judging them. I'm not saying it's a good approach. I'm saying it's what happened.
Are all the archives open now? Are archives in Erivan and the ones in Boston we hear about, are they open totally?
The Armenian archives, the Armenian Revolutionary Federation archives exist, and they're in Massachusetts, in Waltham, Massachusetts. They are not open to scholars. Even the famous Armenian scholars of our time, Richard Hovasinian, I was at a conference with him 6 months ago. He can't get into them. They're closed archives. The other nexus of Armenian archives is the Armenian Patriarch in Jerusalem, which is frequently, those things are frequently cited by a guy named Vakan Dadrian. They are also closed. Reciprocally, the Turkish archives, which were closed for many, many, many years at the dawn of the 21st century, are finally open. So the Turks have opened their archives. The Armenian archives, they're a treasure trove. We are dying to get into them, but we can't.
Why?
Your guess is as good as mine. You'd have to check with the Armenian lobby or the Armenian Revolutionary Federation that exists today. Still exists.
Can you tell us something about the condition of the Third Army during that winter of 1914?
Yeah, this is the army that's been engaged in the Battle of Sarikamish in January of 1914. It's a lot like Valley Forge, freezing, bitter conditions, sub-zero temperatures. The army has lost approximately 30,000 people to climatic conditions. The survivors are weak. They don't have very many supplies. It's a very weak army out there. The Ottomans are logistically challenged throughout the whole war. It's an unindustrialized peasant economy without infrastructure. And so their ability to keep men in the field, the problem for the Ottomans is never the number of people. The problem for the Ottomans is feeding and arming and equipping the people that are out there. And that's the problem that affects the army for the entire course of the war. It's worse. It's worse in Mesopotamia, believe it or not. It's next to the worst in the Caucasus.
Dr. Erickson, thank you very much for what I found a very thoughtful presentation. You listed several contentious questions, yet you have several facts. Is your book footnoted? You have footnotes in your book.
Oh, yeah.
So
hundreds of footnotes. Yeah.
Okay, because there's one thing I found quite curious. You listed the Armenians as Orthodox. Please, that is a mistake. The Russians are Orthodox.
Yes.
The Armenians, the Armenians are apostolic. If they're going to be classified as Orthodox,
I've used the wrong term.
oh,
I've used the wrong
very,
term.
very wrong
Yeah.
term, because the Armenian
Yeah.
church and the Russian church are
Yeah,
not friends.
they're not the same. They're not the same.
I
it's
would
an
also
empathy,
like to
yeah.
ask you-
I get confused when I hear words like Catholicos, you know, but it's the Armenian Apostolic Church.
It's totally understandable, and that's why I'm kind of wondering about the
They
footnotes
are
of the
they are
facts.
strongly linked. They are strongly linked to the Russians. The Catholicos himself is in Tbilisi, and there are direct connections
Which Catholicos?
of the what I call the Orthodox or the
Okay,
Apostolic.
I'm sorry. Let's not go there, but
Okay.
your facts on the church is wrong.
Okay.
But I'd like to
I-
also just point out your photographs. Those photographs were taken at the turn of the century. Did you look at the photographs of the Boer Wars? People at that time, when they were photographed, had to stand still for over a minute worth of exposure. That explains those weird expressions. And this is something a researcher should be aware
people
of.
in old photographs don't smile much anyways. We all have family photographs, and people don't smile. It's one of those things where I hadn't thought about that, but that's probably as good an explanation as any.
It's a fact that can be documented.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that, but that makes sense.
The
We have time for
Catholicos,
one more question?
Yes, could we have one more question?
just a
And
comment, not a question. The Catholicos of the Armenians was in Constantinople,
Not
not in Tiflis.
There's a guy in Tbilisi called the Catholicos, and
Well,
his name is
that-
Kervork the
But-
and at least according to Nalbandian and Dashnavia. I'm not an expert in Armenian history. I look at the military context.
You're
So-
mixing up the churches again. That's a separate church.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is there are strong links between the Armenian church in Eastern Anatolia and Tbilisi. Now, the Armenians say, I'm not saying, buy the book, look at the footnotes, go out and hunt down the references and read it yourself. I'm not making this up. This is Louise Nalbandian, Harac Dashnibian, the two premier people that write about the committees. They're Armenians. They're not Turks. Not Ed Erickson. Last question.
Dr. Erickson, are there scholars working now on Armenian officers during World War I in the Turkish army? We hear about those who were not officers, obviously, who were working on the roads and such. But there were a number of Armenians who were officers and served the Ottoman Empire well. And I'm wondering who, if anyone, is really working on that. I know that the Tarosian memoirs have been contentious recently.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because there really were a number of, officers who were.
The educated nature of the Armenian population leads Armenian men into the technical services. So the Ottoman Medical Corps is densely populated with Armenian doctors. The railway service, the logistics railway service is densely populated with Armenian railway specialists. The artillery, especially the coast artillery, that's the memoirs you're talking about, technical service is densely populated with Armenian officers. They stay in those positions till the end of the war. It's well known in Turkey. It's well known by specialized scholars, by myself. Nobody I know of is working on that problem. It's a great graduate or PhD thesis for somebody. In 1918, there are huge numbers of Armenians still living in their original homes. There are hundreds and hundreds of Armenian officers still serving loyally in the Ottoman army. It's almost an oxymoron. I mean, how can you be an Armenian in 1918 and still serve loyally? It's a niche. It's an empty gap, and it needs work. Why don't you take it on?
I'm an art and architectural historian, military.
That's a great question. That's a great question.
I'd like to thank Dr. Erickson for what has been a very illuminating and thoughtful, I think was the word that was used earlier, and in many ways provocative in a very positive way to force us to think about all of these issues. No, I just want to say thank you very, very
You're welcome.
much.
It's fun.
And
I've
if
enjoyed
you
it
will
very
all
much.